216 BC. The Roman Republic stands at the peak of its power, unbeaten, unshaken, and feared across the ancient world. To end the war once and for all, the Senate gathers the largest army Rome has ever raised, over 80,000 men, marching under the blazing Italian sun. Their mission is simple: destroy Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who has humiliated them again and again. But on the dusty plains of Cannae, everything Rome believed about war collapsed in a single afternoon. More than 50,000 Romans would fall: senators, generals, and soldiers, an entire generation wiped out by one man's mind. This is how Hannibal, with half their numbers, created the most devastating ambush in military history. Rome was frankly spooked, and who could blame them? For 2 agonizing years, Hannibal had been rampaging through Italy, a seemingly unstoppable force. He'd already delivered 2 humiliating, devastating blows to the Republic, first at the Trebia River, then at the treacherous Lake Trasimene. Each defeat had cost Rome tens of thousands of men and shattered their confidence. The Senate, desperate for a decisive victory, for any victory, knew they needed to make a statement. They couldn't afford another loss. So they abandoned their cautious Fabian strategy, that infuriating policy of avoiding direct engagement and simply harassing Hannibal, letting time and attrition wear him down. No, that wasn't Roman enough. They decided to go big. They scraped together an unprecedented 16 legions, effectively doubling the standard consular command, and placed them under the joint leadership of Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Varro. Their orders were simple, brutal, and tragically naive. Find the invader on an open plain, where their overwhelming numbers would surely matter, and utterly crush him. Hannibal, meanwhile, was playing a dangerous game of his own. His position, despite his previous victories, was growing increasingly precarious. Reinforcements from Carthage were notoriously unreliable, often promised, but rarely delivered in full or on time. His Italian allies, while initially enthusiastic, were beginning to waver, their loyalty strained by years of campaigning and Roman resistance. And his veteran troops, though fiercely loyal and incredibly skilled, were tired. They'd been fighting far from home for years. He couldn't win a protracted slugging match. He simply didn't have the resources. What he needed was a knockout punch, a victory so overwhelming, so psychologically shattering, that it would look like a retreat, luring Rome into a fatal error and forcing the Italian cities to finally flock to his banner. He needed to win, and he needed to win now. The stage for this epic confrontation was set outside Cannae, a dusty, sun-baked grain depot nestled on the plains of Apulia, near the meandering Aufidus River. Hannibal didn't choose this spot by accident. It was a meticulously selected killing ground that checked 3 crucial boxes in his tactical playbook. First, the prevailing libeccio wind, a hot, dry gust from the southwest, would blow dust directly into the Roman soldiers' faces all day long, impairing their vision and grating on their morale. Imagine trying to fight a pitched battle with sand constantly stinging your eyes. Second, the Aufidus River protected Hannibal's left flank. This wasn't just a natural barrier. It meant he could confidently stack his formidable cavalry, his most decisive arm, on the open right flank, knowing his left was secure and wouldn't be outflanked. And third, those flat, seemingly endless wheat fields looked absolutely perfect for a straight-up infantry brawl. Precisely the kind of battle Rome, with its massive legions, was itching for. Hannibal was offering them exactly what they thought they wanted, a trap disguised as an opportunity. His deployment was a masterpiece of deceptive simplicity. In the center, he lined up his less reliable troops, his Iberian, Gallic, and Celtiberian mercenaries in a convex, almost crescent-shaped formation, deliberately making them appear weak, a tempting target for the Roman juggernaut. But here's the genius. Tucked back on the flanks, like hidden pincers ready to snap shut, were his elite, battle-hardened African infantry. These were his shock troops, concealed and ready to strike. On the wings, he placed his superior cavalry, a massive force of 10,000 horsemen, nearly 1 in every 5 of his men. Hasdrubal commanded the powerful Hispanic and Gallic heavy cavalry on the left, while Hanno led the swift Numidian light cavalry on the right, poised to sweep the field. Rome, meanwhile, copied the textbook. They deployed their legions in their traditional, unimaginative fashion. Heavy infantry massed deep in the middle, cavalry on the edges. They believed their sheer numbers and the crushing weight of their legionaries would simply bull rush through Hannibal's center, ending the war by lunchtime. They packed their infantry deeper than ever before, creating an enormous, unwieldy block of humanity. They underestimated everything: Hannibal's innovative tactics, the flexibility of his multinational force, and critically, the decisive power of his cavalry. Their reliance on brute force, a tactic that had served them well against less cunning foes, was about to become their undoing. When the Roman consuls gave the order to advance, their legions moved forward, a formidable, disciplined wave of iron and fury. They saw Hannibal's center, those Gauls and Spaniards, and it looked like an easy target. But then, something strange happened. Hannibal's central troops, instead of holding their ground, stepped forward, banged their shields with a defiant yell, and then, almost casually, began walking backwards. Now, this wasn't a panicked flight. Not yet. It was a controlled, deliberate retreat. Just enough to make the Roman line bulge forward, like a mighty bow bending under immense pressure. The Romans, fueled by their own aggression and convinced they were breaking the enemy, pressed harder, pushing deeper into the seemingly yielding Carthaginian line. Every step back that Hannibal's center took shortened the distance between his strong African flanks and the increasingly exposed Roman ribs. Roman officers, their eyes fixed on the folding enemy center, bellowed orders to push, to press, to finish them off. They urged their men forward, packing them so tightly that, as the ancient historian Polybius later grimly observed, many Roman soldiers couldn't even raise their arms to strike. The legions were squeezed 35 ranks deep in places. They believed this density equaled power, an unstoppable human battering ram. But in reality, they were doing precisely what Hannibal wanted. They weren't building momentum. They were building their own cage, sealing their own fate with every triumphant step forward. Their overconfidence, their rigid adherence to traditional tactics, made them blind to the subtle, deadly shift in the battlefield's geometry. They were so focused on the perceived weakness in front of them that they completely missed the powerful jaws closing on either side. While the Roman infantry was being drawn deeper into the trap, the real action was unfolding on the wings. The cavalry fight, often a protracted affair, ended almost before the roar of the infantry clash had truly begun. On the Roman right, Hasdrubal, leading his heavy Hispanic and Gallic horse, utterly routed the Roman cavalry, who were simply outmatched and outmaneuvered. But here's where Hannibal's brilliance and Hasdrubal's discipline truly shone. Instead of the typical pursuit, chasing fleeing enemies off the field for glory, Hasdrubal executed a critical, game-changing pivot. He didn't chase. He reformed his cavalry, galloped swiftly across the rear of the Roman lines, and then slammed into the Latin-allied cavalry on the Roman left, who we were already struggling against Hanno's Numidians. The combined Carthaginian cavalry force utterly annihilated them, sending them scattering in panicked flight. With the Roman flanks completely exposed and their cavalry routed, Hasdrubal didn't pursue. He reformed his triumphant horsemen once more, and then, in a move that sealed Rome's doom, charged directly into the Roman rear. At this precise, terrifying moment, the entire battlefield transformed. In the center, the Romans, drunk on their apparent success, were still blindly crawling forward, convinced they were winning as Hannibal's Gauls continued their controlled retreat. But then, the elite African heavy infantry, positioned like coiled springs on the flanks, wheeled inward with chilling precision, like massive doors slamming shut. Simultaneously, Hasdrubal's cavalry crashed into the Roman rear. In mere minutes, the vast, once proud Roman army was not just surrounded, but folded into an impossibly tight pocket. Shields faced outward. Men were packed so close they couldn't swing a sword, and the dead often remained upright, held in place by the sheer press of bodies around them. Cannae had ceased to be a battle. It had become a human trash compactor, a slaughterhouse on an industrial scale. The double envelopment, the perfect pincer movement, was complete. Even today, modern historians debate the exact figures, trying to piece together the grim truth from fragmented ancient accounts. But Livy and Polybius, our primary sources, both agree on the broad, horrifying ratio of casualties. Of roughly 87,000 Romans who marched onto that field, somewhere between 44,000 and a staggering 70,000 were killed. Think about that for a moment. At the higher end, over 80% of their army was wiped out in a single afternoon. Hannibal, by comparison, lost about 5,700 of his own men. The scale of the disparity is almost incomprehensible. The human cost was equally devastating. 70 senators, a huge portion of Rome's political elite, perished. 29 military tribunes, the backbone of their officer corps, fell. And both consuls, the supreme commanders of the Republic, died on the same afternoon. Rome would, of course, suffer other defeats in its long and bloody history, another half-dozen battles where losses were heavy. But never again, not once, would an entire generation of its political and military class be wiped out in a single engagement. The impact was not just military, but societal, political, and psychological. The phrase, "to win a Cannae," still echoes through military academies and history books today. It means more than just a victory. It signifies an annihilation so complete, so utter, that the enemy ceases to exist as a coherent fighting force. It's a term reserved for the most devastating and decisive triumphs, a testament to Hannibal's unparalleled tactical genius and Rome's catastrophic misjudgment. After such an earth-shattering victory, the question invariably arises: if Hannibal could win so decisively, so completely, why didn't he simply roll down the Via Appia and knock on Rome's gates? Why didn't he march on the capital and finish the war right then and there? It's a question that has puzzled historians for millennia, and the answer, like so much in warfare, boils down to cold, hard logistics and the indomitable spirit of Rome itself. First, the practicalities. Hannibal simply didn't have the tools for a successful siege. He had no heavy siege engines, catapults, rams, siege towers, necessary to breach the formidable walls of a city like Rome. He had no secure port to guarantee a consistent flow of supplies and reinforcements from Carthage. And without that, besieging a massive city for months would have been an act of suicidal folly. He couldn't risk his army starving outside a hostile capital while awaiting unreliable shipments across a sea dominated by Roman naval power. His genius was on the open battlefield, not in the slow, grinding warfare of a siege. More importantly, Rome refused to blink. In the face of utter catastrophe, the Senate displayed an astonishing, almost defiant resilience. Instead of capitulating, they doubled down. They forbade public mourning, fearing it would show weakness and sap morale. They immediately set about raising new legions, drawing on every able-bodied man, even slaves and teenagers, demonstrating their unwavering resolve. They returned to the very Fabian strategy they had so scornfully abandoned, a strategy of delay, of attrition, of avoiding direct confrontation while slowly rebuilding their strength. Hannibal's genius, extraordinary as it was ultimately battlefield, not political. He had hoped that Cannae would be the shock that finally broke Rome's network of Italian allies, inspiring them to revolt en masse and join his cause. But instead, Cannae shocked many Italian cities into neutrality rather than outright rebellion. They saw Rome's capacity for endurance, its refusal to surrender, and decided that switching sides might just mean exchanging one powerful master for another, potentially more precarious one. So Hannibal roamed the south of Italy for another 14 long years, winning skirmishes, causing havoc, but never quite forcing the knockout blow that would end the war. He could win battles, yes, but he couldn't win the war of attrition against a state that simply refused to acknowledge defeat. The Battle of Cannae isn't just a historical footnote. It's a living lesson, a cornerstone of military education. Every modern staff college, from West Point in the United States to Sandhurst in the UK, walks its cadets through the intricate details of Cannae. Why? Because it remains the cleanest, most devastating example of a double envelopment ever conceived and executed. It teaches timeless principles: how to use terrain to fix an enemy, how to bait them into overcommitting their forces, how to perfectly time a flanking strike, and how to finish with decisive cavalry action. The German Field Marshal Alfred von Schlieffen, architect of the infamous Schlieffen Plan for World War I, openly copied Hannibal's blueprint, attempting to achieve a similar encirclement on a grand strategic scale. Decades later, during Operation Desert Storm, General Norman Schwarzkopf cited Cannae as a key inspiration for his left hook maneuver, which utterly decimated the Iraqi army. The real takeaway from Cannae isn't about the sheer numbers, though they are staggering. It's about elasticity versus rigidity. Hannibal understood that military strength isn't just about brute force. It's about flexibility, deception, and exploiting the enemy's weaknesses, especially their pride and predictable tactics. He stretched Roman aggression, allowing their rigid, overconfident push to draw them deeper and deeper into his trap, until their own momentum became their undoing. He stretched them until their lines snapped back, not just metaphorically, but literally, strangling them in their own tightly packed formation. It's a brutal, brilliant lesson in how brains can outfox brute size, a lesson that continues to shape military thought even today. If you enjoyed seeing how pure tactical genius can outfox brute size and change the course of history, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell. There are plenty more commanders who turn the odds inside out waiting to be discovered. Drop a comment below telling me which underdog battle you'd like me to break down next. And don't forget to check out the playlist on my channel for more ancient tactics that still shape modern wars.